Hey there. Welcome back to our channel. Today, I want to say something that married women are not going to want to hear. Keeping a good man happy is not complicated or costly. It doesn't depend on therapy, self-help materials, retreats, or elaborate theories about love languages or attachment styles. At its core, it comes down to just two things: peace and intimacy. That's it. Many marriages aren't falling apart because men expect too much, but because some wives treat their husband's needs as optional, something to give or withhold depending on whether their own expectations are being met. That dynamic is not a healthy partnership. It resembles control more than commitment. Let me start with peace, because its meaning is often misunderstood by many wives. For a man, peace isn't simply the absence of arguments or noise. It is a deeper, physical sense of relief he feels when he comes home, the moment his body relaxes, his mind slows, and he no longer feels pressured or on guard. It is a space where he doesn't have to manage emotions, expect chaos, or immediately meet demands. He can just exist. That sense of calm isn't a luxury, it's essential. Just like rest or water, it sustains him. When a man experiences real peace at home, it strengthens his ability to handle everything else: his work, his patience, his role as a father, and his consistency in showing up for others. Peace refuels him. Most wives understand this. They have seen the difference between a man who is truly comfortable and one who never fully relaxes because tension lingers in his environment. Yet, that peace often gets eroded, not always through major conflicts, but through small, repeated behaviors that feel justified in the moment. Consider a common situation. A husband takes a stand on something: finances, plans, or a decision he doesn't agree with. Instead of engaging in a respectful exchange of perspectives, the discussion changes into persistence. The issue is revisited repeatedly, in different ways and at different times, creating ongoing tension. Over time, the aim changes. It is no longer about understanding each other but about wearing him down until holding his position becomes more exhausting than giving in. He eventually relents, not because he's convinced, but because he wants relief from the pressure. That outcome may feel like success, but it isn't. It's not resolution, it's erosion of respect and stability. What gets damaged in those moments isn't just his sense of peace. Something deeper is chipped away: his belief that his voice actually counts in the marriage. Instead of feeling heard, he begins to feel like his perspective will either be dismissed or slowly pushed aside. Rather than an equal partner, he starts to feel like an obstacle that needs to be managed. When this pattern repeats, the change is gradual but serious. He is still there physically, but internally he begins to disengage. What remains is a man who goes along with things without truly believing in them, and that kind of compliance signals emotional withdrawal. From the outside, this change can be easy to misread. He stops giving his opinions, not because he has none, but because experience has taught him it is not worth the effort. Speaking up feels costly and pointless, so he chooses silence. He responds when asked but keeps his real thoughts to himself. But when the wife notices the silence, she interprets it as a lack of communication. She tells others he no longer opens up, that he won't engage. What she often doesn't see is the connection between his withdrawal and the environment that shaped it. The same thing happens with decision-making. He stops pushing for what he wants, not because his preferences disappeared, but because advocating for them tends to lead to prolonged tension and eventual defeat. Over time, he decides it's easier to just agree. From the wife's perspective, this can look like indifference or passivity, even a lack of leadership. What goes unnoticed is that the cost of leading became so high that he stopped trying. Eventually, he starts carving out distance in whatever ways he can, spending more time on his phone, in the garage, or anywhere that offers a sense of comfort he no longer feels in the marriage. This isn't necessarily because his feelings vanished but because staying emotionally engaged in that environment became draining. People naturally pull back from what consistently exhausts them. So he remains present in body, but not fully in spirit. Over time, that distance becomes his refuge. This is often the long-term result of constant pressure, not a partner who genuinely comes around, but one who learns that agreement is the only path that avoids conflict. There's another dynamic at play as well, and it needs to be addressed plainly. Now let us talk about intimacy. Using intimacy as a bargaining tool can be deeply harmful to a relationship. This isn't about obligation, it's about intent. When closeness is offered or withheld based on compliance, it turns something meaningful into a form of control. That sends a powerful message, that connection itself is conditional, and that desire is not freely given but strategically used. Instead of feeling chosen, he begins to feel managed, like affection is something to be earned or withheld depending on performance. Put simply, what should be genuine connection starts to feel transactional. When a man begins to notice this dynamic in his marriage, even if he can't fully put it into words, he feels something deeply unsettling. It's the sense of being treated less like a partner and more like something to be managed. His independence gets discouraged, his compliance gets rewarded, and the very thing that should represent genuine connection, intimacy, starts to feel like a tool being used on him rather than shared with him. Once that change happens in his mind, it's hard to reverse. What used to feel like authentic desire now feels conditional, even transactional. And over time, that realization changes how he shows up in the marriage. At first, he tries. He makes efforts to reconnect, adjusts his behavior, and looks for ways to fix what seems broken. He's motivated because he believes the marriage can improve and because the connection still matters to him. But if the same pattern continues, if affection is repeatedly withheld and clearly tied to his behavior, something in him begins to shut down. He stops initiating, not because the desire is gone, but because reaching out increasingly leads to rejection. Each attempt that goes unanswered reinforces a painful message about his place in the marriage. That kind of repeated experience leaves a mark. It's not obvious on the surface, but internally it builds into a quiet wound. Over time, he becomes more reserved, less expressive, and less emotionally present. The warmth fades, replaced by a kind of emotional flatness that comes from no longer expecting closeness. The wife notices the change but often misreads it. She sees distance and calls it coldness. She wonders why he's pulling away. What she may not see is how that distance was formed, through repeated moments where he reached out and was met with absence instead of connection. Bit by bit, a barrier forms between them. And eventually, she finds herself on the other side of it, unsure how it got there. What makes this especially difficult is that, underneath all that distance, his core need hasn't disappeared. He still wants to feel chosen, desired, and valued, not for what he provides or agrees to, but simply for who he is. That need doesn't vanish, it just gets buried. And when it stays buried, it shows up elsewhere, in resentment, detachment, or a slow emotional withdrawal that becomes visible to everyone except the person closest to him. In many cases, he hasn't fundamentally changed. He's the same person she married, just someone who learned, over time, that being that person wasn't welcomed in the way he needed. This pattern is common, even in relationships where love is genuine. That's because it's possible to care deeply about someone in general yet act in self-serving ways in specific moments. When the desire to win an argument or maintain control overrides the need for peace and connection, love isn't really guiding those actions, preference is. Some people approach marriage as if it were a kind of scoreboard. Giving feels like losing, and receiving feels like winning. Every interaction becomes something to track, something to balance. In that mindset, withholding feels like protection, and generosity feels risky. But that framework is flawed at its core. Healthy relationships aren't about trading or keeping score. What you give doesn't diminish you, it often strengthens the connection and brings more back in return. A man who feels comfortable and genuinely valued tends to show up more fully, more present, more engaged, more willing to invest. A man who feels managed or controlled tends to pull back. The difference comes down to how the marriage is approached. Some couples operate from a place of mutual generosity, where giving isn't seen as a loss but as something that builds the marriage. From the outside, those marriages can look effortless, not because they lack challenges, but because both people stopped treating the marriage like a competition and started treating it like a shared effort. Imagine two marriages that start the same but take different paths. In one, the wife approaches the marriage strategically, holding back peace or closeness to influence outcomes, carefully measuring what she gives to ensure she never gives more than she gets. From her perspective, this feels smart and protective. But that approach slowly reshapes the marriage into something transactional, where connection becomes conditional and both partners end up losing more than they realize. 5 years into the marriage, the husband has grown quieter in ways he never used to be. He goes along with things he doesn't truly agree with because pushing back feels too costly. He no longer reaches for his wife like he once did. Repeated rejection has trained him to stop trying. He comes home and performs the role of being present, but the part of him that was once genuinely engaged has retreated somewhere out of her reach. She looks at him and feels like she doesn't know him anymore. She tells others he has changed. In reality, he hasn't changed, he has adjusted to the dynamic of the marriage. In a different marriage, the wife approaches things with generosity. She creates a sense of peace, not as a reward, but because she understands it supports everything she hopes to receive from him. She offers intimacy freely, knowing that genuine desire cannot be forced or negotiated. She listens to his perspective with sincerity, recognizing that a man who feels hurt remains emotionally invested. 5 years in, this husband shows up differently. His presence is real and noticeable. His motivation carries into all areas of life. He gives to her willingly, without being asked, because generosity reflects the environment she has built. She credits her luck, believing she found a good man. But the difference isn't the man, it's the marriage she helped create from the same kind of person. The key variable isn't the man, it's the environment. And whether acknowledged or not, the woman plays a central role in shaping that environment. For any wife reflecting on this, consider something carefully. The man you describe as distant or emotionally unavailable isn't communicating through words anymore. He stopped doing that because it became too costly. Instead, he communicates through his withdrawal, his silence, and the way he is physically present but emotionally absent. What that behavior is saying is simple: the environment around him doesn't allow him to fully show up. So he has adapted in the only way he can, doing just enough to maintain the marriage while protecting what remains of himself. That isn't necessarily a failure on his part. It can be a form of self-preservation within the conditions that exist. So the real question isn't what happened to him. It's whether you're willing to examine what has been built and choose to create something different, not as a transaction or because he deserves it, but because the kind of marriage you want requires letting go of scorekeeping. Using peace or intimacy as bargaining tools may create short-term compliance, but it builds long-term resentment. And resentment, when it quietly accumulates over time, doesn't stay contained. It eventually leads to distance, sometimes sudden, but more often gradual, until the man emotionally checks out of the life he once expected to feel like home. A wife who understands this and chooses generosity, genuine partnership, and openness over control or manipulation isn't being naive. She's choosing an approach that actually leads to a healthier outcome. For men, this may feel familiar: the sense of peace always just out of reach, intimacy feeling conditional, and the slow transformation into someone distant without fully realizing how it happened. For women, if any part of this feels uncomfortably true, it may be worth sitting with that feeling for a moment before reacting. Not focusing on his shortcomings, but reflecting on your own role. That pause, the willingness to consider an uncomfortable truth without immediately deflecting it, is often where real change in a marriage begins.